We've opened up this talk to members and non-members. So I'll take a quick minute to talk about Sidebar. If you're already a Sidebar member, you know it's awesome. But Sidebar is a career growth platform. It started a couple years ago as a peer network where you'd meet other like-minded folks and learn and grow together. Believed in the collective wisdom concept, right? Now it's matured into so much more. There are very specific kind of groups you can be part of. There's networking you can do, and there's speaker series where you get to hear from amazing people like Juan as well. So if you haven't heard of Sidebar, check it out. I'm Sue Belagodu. I'm one of the founding members of Sidebar, which is a fancy way of saying I've been here for about 3 years now. And outside of Sidebar, I work with startup founders to help them in their AI journey. Essentially, I built an AI native product, realized how difficult it was. So now I work with other founders through the journey of building and selling. And I'm so excited for today's conversation because when I connected with Juan about this, we had such a rich conversation about humans and robots and how, sometimes everybody sounds alike. Um, so I'm looking forward to it. So Juan Carlos is the founder of Remind. It's a decision-making system which is built on a simple belief. You're either thinking of yourself or being thought for. It's so powerful. Someone recently even told me you're being spoken about in rooms you're not there. So how do you make sure you're being spoken about in the right way? He's also the SVP of technology at Intercare Therapy. And more importantly, he's a Sidebar member, a great guy to just know. So he has a Substack that I follow and I love reading one. Thanks for pointing me to that. And thank you for being here today. We love that you are speaking to our community members and take it away. It's you from now on.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. That was a very nice intro. And I'm excited to be here with you all. So I'll begin with something that when I said it before, it sounds intense. So I'll begin, but with knowledge that it's something that has produced some feelings. You didn't choose most of what you believe. You inherited it. And that's not an accusation. And it's not a failure. It's actually the most human thing about us. The brain is not built for a rebuild from scratch every morning. You know, it borrows, it inherits, it defaults. And honestly, that's how it's designed to work. You know, we inherit language and assumptions and categories and defaults from our family and from culture and from our industry and from whatever we've been surrounded by long enough to stop questioning. You know, we give these permissions, these green lights to all kinds of things because most of the time this is efficient and it helps us move fast. But efficiency has a cost, and the cost is invisible until you look for it. So every waking moment, you're either thinking for yourself or being thought for. And there really is no neutral ground. The information you encounter, the headlines, the summaries, the confident takes from all of those influencers that we love to follow. Someone framed it before you saw it. Someone decided what mattered. And unless you question the frame, you inherit their conclusion as your own. And that is the hidden cost of speed. And we're living it today in myriad ways. You stop noticing what is shaping your thinking while you do. But we are living in a moment where speed without reflection has become expensive. And the world no longer just hands you information. It hands you interpretations, summaries, consensus. It suggests the next thoughts that you should have. And that changes what matters. The skill that defines the next decade, from my perspective, is not knowing more. In fact, that is something that is now about 3-4 years old. It is knowing how to think. The same skill that will make someone more resilient in a world shaped by AI is the same skill I'm trying to instill in my children. And it's not how to use every tool, because that's impossible. In fact, I've tried my best to learn as many tools as I can, and I still every day am surprised at how many new tools are out there to use. No, it's how to think. And that's what I've thought about now for a long time. And I learned the hard way. 15 years in the film industry, that's where I started. And then I left, which was a very challenging decision. And I moved to the desert, which is where I live today in Joshua Tree. And I told myself I was getting out and I was starting over. And it was a clearing of the slate, so to speak. The quiet of the desert was worse. And it's not because the desert failed me. It just was very, very effective. It's because it worked. Without the noise to organize my identity around, I could see for the first time what I had actually been living inside. Scripts that I hadn't written, hierarchies I just accepted purely. The same patterns, right? Running untouched. And I had brought everything from the city and the challenges that I faced there right with me. The container of the environment changed, but the patterns didn't. And that's what this work is about. Once I noticed that, I noticed what I needed to do. And, we've all been here before, sort of, right? Because the information age gave us volume and more data than anyone of us could absorb. And we've lived with that. And we've actually built ourselves. And a lot of people in this room, like myself, are knowledge workers, right? And that's the skill that we learned, filtering, being able to produce against that knowledge. And then the attention economy came, and that changed the game again. And the platform stopped giving you information. They started engineering that information to help you see and feel and believe in specific ways. And it's not to serve you. It was to serve itself and its own machinations, right? It's to serve that corporation. We bought that, we thought that was the problem, and it was only a setup. This is not the information age that we were promised. This is, at least from my perspective, the manipulation age. AI does not create knowledge. It compresses consensus. It's trained on the internet's collective output, and it returns the most probable answer, the most popular answer. And what the crowd already believes becomes what the machine confirms. What the machine confirms becomes the default. Independent thought does not get suppressed, right? It gets dissolved. It's averaged into the mean. Popular opinion becomes training data, becomes output. It becomes reinforced opinion. And then the loop closes. And if you cannot think for yourself, you cannot evaluate what a machine tells you. You just regurgitate it with more confidence. And, we're all privy to this. I mean, we're all doing it with all of our AI platforms. And I'm a huge advocate for AI. So I say this with the understanding of this being a challenging moment for us. But it's one of the strangest features of modern life. You can see the pattern and still move with it. You can name the manipulation and understand the incentives, recognize that system, and still remain unchanged by it. We can be fluent in that diagnosis and then behaviorally identical, right? And that's something that I feel deeply right now in this duality, in this space that we live in modernity. And that's the challenge. It's not just seeing clearly, but learning how to see in a way that changes what you do next. Because this is a practice, a way to take ownership of how you think, and the frames that you inherit become the conclusions you defend unless you interrupt them. So here is that interruption. Most people never question the frame. They inherit it and call it thinking. And many people here already do a lot of questioning, right? And it's inbuilt into a lot of our jobs and the way that we function, and we want to ask that question. That's a big piece of what is a part of what makes us good at what we do. So before your next decision, especially one that feels obvious, because I think this is where we get tripped up often, ask, what am I assuming? What perspective am I using? What am I not seeing? And then ask one more question, and it's a very important one about second order thinking. And if this is right, what happens next? And that's not really a trick, right? That's very obvious. It sounds obvious. Many of the simplest pieces of wisdom I find in my life to be incredibly obvious. It's the beginning of how you reclaim to think. And it's not by adding more information. It's by examining the structure underneath it. And that's the work. It's not about building opinions. It's about building the system that produces them. So we're rewriting the defaults you operate from, and we're strengthening the frame before the conclusion arrives. And just to sort of couch this in something like an example, instead of staying inside of the sort of lofty space, the brainy space, it's 1991, right? 8 scientists seal themselves inside this 150 million glass dome in Arizona. You all might know about this. It's Biosphere 2. So, the mission here is to prove that humans can live in a closed, self-sustaining environment. And they modeled everything to be able to do this. They have a rainforest. They have an ocean. They have the savanna. They have agriculture. 16 months in, this oxygen level that they're supposed to keep up has dropped to the equivalent of living at 14,000 feet in elevation. And the problem here is that you have this enriched soil-fed bacteria, and you have bacteria consuming the oxygen, and the concrete's absorbing the CO2, and it's locking it away as this calcium carbonate. And they don't know about this. So, it was supposed to be a warning signal, the rising CO2, and the oxygen just kept disappearing. Nothing flagged it. And so nobody in that group asked, what are we assuming about how this system works? What perspective are we missing? What are we not seeing? If this is right, what happens next? They built this biosphere, this technical marvel. And they got the wilderness, they got the environment with unforeseen consequences. And that's the gap between the questions you ask and the ones you skip. So the frame here is not anti-technology, and it's certainly not anti-modern. It's truly pro-agency. It's using every tool available and still be the one driving this car that you're driving, right? The proverbial car of oneself. That's what this is about. And we're going to spend the rest of this time unpacking why that works and how to do it more deliberately. So the answer starts with what you use to see. And for me, it's not the apps and it's not the systems, it's mental tools. A mental model is not a rule. And I'm sure that a lot of you have lived and breathed mental models from a lot of different spaces and frameworks that you use in your work. I certainly do that every day of my life. And I'm a big fan of folks like Shane Parrish and Charlie Munger. And those are some of the icons that I have in my mind when I think about mental models and thinking. But a mental model for me it's not a fact, it's a lens, right? it changes what you can see. And most people use the same small set of inherited lenses their entire lives. And that's what I was doing. And that's what I noticed about myself when I came to the desert. Same lens, same results. And the shift is choosing your lenses on purpose. Most people think in 2 steps: notice, decide, right? Something happens and they react. And the problem is not speed. The problem is what gets skipped. Clear thinking has 4 steps. And here's what they are. Notice remains. Let's say your company is considering a new tool and everyone agrees, hey, that's going to save time. Great. Decision feels obvious. You catch yourself about to say yes, right? This happens all the time, at least where I work. Everyone's immediate about a decision like that. Seems obvious. Let's go. Just go ahead. Make the purchase, or let's agree on the new process. And then we frame, right? What lens should I use here? And so one of the things that I like to do at that point, try inversion. Instead of asking how something succeeds, ask how it fails. And then a reflect moment. What lens should I use here? Right? 3 people on the team who will resist this new change and slow everyone else down while they catch up. And you see things you did not see 30 seconds ago just by doing one small set of asks, right? And then you decide. Maybe you still say yes, but you build the rollout differently than you would have before. So what does that tell us? The middle is where thinking actually happens in frame and reflect. That is the space between stimulus and response. And that is where you stop inheriting and start choosing. The best way to understand a tool is to watch it run on something real. And that's what I want to do with you all right now. So I'm going to run through a couple of my favorite models and talk about it under the wonderful story of Balloon Fest, which some of you might be aware of. It's from the 80s. So if you're into like 80s lore, then you might be into it. So it's September 27th, 1986, Cleveland, Ohio. And there's a structure the size of a city block that sits in public square, right? And there's 2,500 volunteers. And they have blown up about 1.5 million balloons at that point. And the goal is this world record for charity for the United Way. And they release the net and the balloons erupt upward. And for 30 seconds, it is magical, right? It's pretty. There's a lot of balloons in the air. And the weather shifts, cold air, rain, the balloons collapse down, right? And they're all inflated and the airport shuts down and traffic accidents spike and some animals start to panic. And on Lake Erie, there's some fishermen that have capsized and there's a search and rescue underway and helicopters can't figure out the difference between a human and the balloons and they die. And the organizers weren't careless. They were thoughtful. They were coordinated. They were doing something that felt good. And that is exactly the point. The problem was not the execution. The problem was the questions they never asked. Now, when we think about this under models, what could have helped? What happens when we release the balloons? You know, number one, we're going to think in second order thinking. The answer, of course, first order thinking is they go up. They do not ask, and then what? Where do they come down? What else is happening that day? Who else might be affected? And that's the difference. First order thinking is what happens. Second order thinking is what happens next. And then what? And then what? And so on. First order thinkers see the balloon release, and that's what they saw. And second order thinkers see the weather and the airport and the lake and the search rescue mission. And the organizers stopped one step too soon. And here is what makes that hard to catch. First order thinking feels complete. We think we've thought of everything at that moment. You answered the question, the balloons went up. I mean, and that in effect is just a massive amount of effort just to do that piece, right? I mean, getting 2,500 people to that space is a very challenging thing to do. And having that amount of volunteers and that amount of structure is intense. That feeling of completeness is the trap. Number 2 is inversion. And we spoke about it a little bit before. And there is a second tool here, right, that I love. And it's that most problem starts with what should we do? Inversion starts somewhere else. It's what guarantees this fails. Instead of building toward success, you remove the conditions for failure. Most plans do not fail because they lack ambition. They usually fail because they quietly include obvious errors that nobody looked for. Inversion is one of those that I love because it forces you to look. And it applies here to Balloon Fest. So what guarantees this fails? A fixed launch date with no weather contingency. An active search and rescue operation on the lake. The failure was findable if you looked for it. And then my third favorite in any circumstance is steel manning, which I know that a lot of people do, but it's become my biggest go-to when trying to understand the other side. And here's the part that makes it honest. The case for releasing these balloons was strong. So it's Cleveland, it's 1986, right? And we set the stage with where they are 2 years after the steel industry had collapsed. A city that really needs something to kind of rally around, something that shows they feel good about this moment, that they can change things around. And this charity, United Way at the time, has momentum. You got the mayor at this thing. You've got all these people that show up to volunteer. There's goodwill, there's coordination, there's community. If you'd been in that room, you might have said yes, right? And that's the pull. And that is why steel manning is, not finding just the flaws here. It's building the strongest version of a case before you engage. Because the most dangerous decisions do not arrive looking dangerous. They arrive looking like this: good cause, real momentum. People really care. So if you cannot understand why something appeals, you are not thinking yet. You are
Juan,
defending.
can I
Yeah,
add
please
something?
go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, I have managed a lot of teams, a lot of companies, and one of the slide, I empower individual contributors when I start. One of the slide I have is when we do a complex project is that it's so, counterintuitive slide is called why would this project fail? And I will ask everybody in the team and especially ICs, not the managers, individual contributors, that you have full power to tell me. I am the chief data, chief AI. You have full power, my power to tell me why would we fail? And that is where you start listening to the people who have this fear, who are individual contributor who has no power in the company, but they are the ones who will tell you why would we fail. They're so afraid of their manager, their director, their VP. And that is where you need to empower them. And I say that right now nobody has any title. I am the boss of this company. I want everybody to speak up. Not that this is great idea, Wadwa, this is amazing. I want you to tell me what is the flaws in this idea, and I want one person to document everything. Why would we fail on this project? That is some key learning I have done, and people would speak up once you empower them.
Could not agree more. I love the way that you said that. Sit here.
Thanks.
100% aligned. And I think when I think about this, and it's interesting because I think one of the challenges is breaking that concept of groupthink in groups, right? Which is some of what you're describing. It's this concept around we're here together. And if we don't allow people to have independent thought, then they will very naturally try to adhere to what looks like popular thought in a given moment. There's another of this pattern now, and it's sort of this problem of recognition without consequence. And we are very good at seeing what is broken and naming the system and naming those incentives and naming that manipulation. But, naming is not the escape hatch either. It's a system that can survive being recognized if recognition does not change behavior. In some cases, recognition becomes part of the system. So here's how it works, right? Someone identifies a pattern, say how algorithms shape attention and how incentives distort information, how outrage is manufactured. And that insight gets compressed into a post, a thread, some hot take. It circulates, it gets agreed with, it generates engagement. The insight is correct. And the person sharing it is doing exactly what they described, using the exact system they critiqued to distribute the critique. The awareness gets absorbed, it's repackaged, it's shared, it's reinforced, and then nothing changes. And that's a second order effect that I see a lot now. What happens when awareness itself gets absorbed? So I want to spend a little bit of time chatting about this. So let's get into a scenario and have you all go through this with me. And I'm curious about what comes out of this. So let's say, for example, and I feel like this might be true for a lot of folks here, that your organization has adopted AI aggressively, right? And so we're about, say, 6 months in, and maybe longer for many of you, to the decision that you made, and you're running quickly, right? So I'd love to hear some first order thoughts about what you're seeing as you adopt organizationally AI, right? So what are some of the first order effects of adapting, or I should say, adopting AI? And feel free to put it into the chat. This can be things, simply as like, oh, we have faster output or what have you. But I'll wait for a minute or so. I want to hear from you all. What are some of the things that you see as you've adopted AI, either somewhat aggressively, not? I'm curious. So would love to hear that as an initial step here. A thought partner? Yeah. People outsourcing their work to AI in a way that produces AI slop, for sure. I think we feel the burden of that on social media. How many people run LinkedIn and have noticed, like in the last year, how bad it's gotten from the amount of automatically generated posts that seem to populate? And I feel like we always see like the X, Y thing. It's not this, it's that, it's this, it's not that, it's that and that and that, but not this, but it's that. So there's a lot of that that I see. Yeah. Yeah. LinkedIn auto-generated posts. Overall process improvement, productivity gains, change management, insecurity among some. Yeah. People outsourcing. Yeah. A lot of experimentation in silos. Yeah, that's an interesting one. The AI adoption in most organizations right now is without any defined outcomes. Not many leaders know what to expect by adopting various tools and burning through tokens. As a result, even very subpar products, content, features are viewed as progress. Yeah, that's a real one. That's a real one. Well, great. Those are all wonderful. Yeah, discovery. Oh, yeah, great. More coming in. Discovery tool still needs domain expertise, no ROI, solution looking for problems, and it has potential. Too much text everywhere, including messages and emails. Yeah. Like that's like the funniest part. It spits out so much context, and we get these long diatribes from our teammates now. And you can always sort of smell when it's been created. And there's too much text. Yeah. And there's more distraction as people are trying everything without focus. More things are started and never finished. And decision making, let's see here. Decision making being outsourced from the team to leadership via producing too many options of AI slop for leadership to decide. That's an interesting one too. That's fascinating. So let's dig in here a little bit. There's something here that we can run through now for some second order thinking. And we can just run a little bit of a chain, and I'll be curious about a couple of these, and maybe we can take a quick look and just do some pushes here to see what we come up with. So let's see here. Let's run with this last one. Decision making being outsourced from the team to leadership via producing too many options of AI slop for leadership to decide. Let's start there. So let's ask, and then what? So we have a scenario, we see it, we're getting too many inputs from our team, and decision makers are challenged. What happens as a result of that? And I might butcher this name, so please forgive me. Okay, great. Sean, do you want to talk about and then what?
Sure. I think I really relate to what some other folks were sharing just in regards to the mass volume of text that's being shared and options that are being shared. As a leader myself, and I'll turn my camera on here so I can be present. And I think that, and then what becomes now I have this mass of information, whereas previously I had folks who would come to me and say, like, here's like my top 3 recommendations, or here's what I would like to do, or it's sort of like helping me prioritize as well. And so now I find that I'm like, okay, I almost need an AI to read through all of this to help me figure out what is the most important like headline for me to read, just because I'm one human being and I can only process so much information. So I almost feel like this generation of AI slop is generating a ton of text, a ton of information, a ton of ideas, and now I'm being left with like, okay, the team has produced these ideas, but now I'm having to discern what is the appropriate thing to do, and now I'm questioning: do I now rely on AI to help me do that? Which is almost like second, and like as a second order now, it's like, oh, even more reliant. We're even more outsourcing to AI to think. And so I feel like I'm almost having to go back to my team and give them direction to say, like, okay, can you please give me please read through this. I can tell that you've used AI to support your work. That's great, but please read through this and tell me what you would recommend that I focus on, or what you would recommend that we as a team focus on, so that I'm almost pushing back and pushing the thinking back to the team member who thinks that like they've completed the task or they've completed their work. Productivity equals more documents. Productivity equals more feature ideas. Productivity equals, I'm showing volume as opposed to showing focus or showing strategic thought.
How do you, and it goes, I think, to the next question of, so the next and then is synthesis, right? So you're asking them for synthesis, and then what? And so let's say they've gone back now, they've kind of done that work, and then what? So now you have something that's synthesized, that's obviously like a curated AI output. What then? Out of curiosity, and I don't know what the answer is. It just sounds like you've been down this road.
Yeah. I think at this stage I'm at the point of when that synthesis comes back to me, I'm now asking the team to help us prioritize if it's roadmap related, if it's feature related, or share like an impact that they expect from deciding to prioritize on this project or deciding to prioritize this feature. And actually, helping them start to learn how I am thinking about this so that we can find the right ways to use AI for thought generation or find the right ways to use AI for efficiency, so that we're not just thinking about, I guess, the wrong things for um, what does success equal? Success does not equal generation of randomness or generation of text or generation of ideas. Like success equals we're moving the product forward, we're moving the business forward, we're driving actual business objectives. And so, I think right now, sort of, I'm very focused on just teaching team members not to uh, think differently about what the purpose of work is or what the purpose of all of our jobs are, just because they have these AI tools that can make them look more efficient or effective.
It's such a interesting nuance to the idea of extreme productivity as a showmanship type of approach. It's almost like the old version of virtue signaling is this like tokens maxing problem. Let's run through one more. Kanika. AI features for the sake of AI, no real ROI evaluation. So this is another wonderful one. What happens after that? And I don't mean to put you on the spot if you don't want to speak. So happy for anyone to sort of lend their voice here. How do we think about that? What's the next thing that happens when you've now, say, built some new AI features and they don't evaluate? Yeah, Mima.
Hi, great conversation. This has been something that's been bothering me as well. When it comes to the features, it's similar to what Sean had just mentioned. In the recipient end, there's an overwhelm. Okay, there's a lot of features here. What do we do? And how do I evaluate? It takes away from the user experience significantly, and it kind of gets in the way of getting the value that they want from the tool. And consequently, I wonder if they're just stopping using it, and there's a lot of like churning that's happening as a result.
Yeah. Yeah, heard. Agreed. Anyone else have another and then after Mima's? All right. We'll do one last one and then we'll flip it. So how do you balance speed of understanding information quickly versus ferrying out bias? Information and news moves so quickly. How do you keep up without reading all news sources ourselves? So that's a fascinating one too. So what happens when you can't keep up is, I think, the underlying challenge there. Is that right, B?
Yes, that's exactly right. Like the news cycle moves so quickly, and even just information about AI products and features themselves move so quickly. How do you, I mean, a lot of times we are sort of relying on certain sources you can trust, but short of reading everything yourself, how can you balance that speed with knowing that you're not being too swayed by someone else's frame or perspective?
Agreed. And so let's kind of run it through like a second order thinking. Say you're doing some reading and you're getting kind of pulled, right? I'm culprit of this. So an example for me is basically anything that the writer from every Dan Shipper does. I like absorb it as if it's like a giant green light, and I catch myself prior sometimes, but not always, to doing something just because I read about it through that avenue that I prefer, right? And so when I do things, sometimes they're very impulsive. because I've already given that sort of green light. One of them is, getting on the train for buying a Mac Mini, which, hands raised, right? Here I go. I have like my random specific use case for this, and I'm trying my best, I think, to your point, B, to keep up. And so how many times do we fall privy to that problem? I think a lot of it relates back to the framing mechanism, right? So how do you take a little bit more time to notice, right? And frame and reflect and decide. There's just those pieces, I think, are places where if we give too much slack to this outsourcing of information and understanding to others, then we're going to fall privy to that exact gap that we didn't do the work for ourselves. And if we don't do the work for ourselves, then we're going to be challenged by the outcome, which is somebody else's outcome. Okay, I'm going to flip it unless, oh yeah, please go for it, Sudhir.
So we are falling for somebody's agenda. What's happening in the market is that this venture capitalist, VC, Sequoia, A16, Anderson, everybody has got this. I don't know if you have recently seen one pager coming in. How for CEOs, for founders. So they have this beautiful one pages coming in. I'm coming to my point. So what is happening is that VCs have their own agenda. So our C-level people will come with this one pager saying that, do you know that Sequoia Capital is saying this? And we double click on that. This comes on a big screen and all C-level are looking at this. Day before yesterday, we had this coming from A16 is that it's a 5 people team. You don't need 30 people in engineering. So what's happening is that there's an agenda of bunch of VCs. They're pushing every day on LinkedIn this info. So this is called, if you're not smart, you're going to fall for somebody's agenda. So our C-level comes to me, do you think, wow, we can build this? They say type A companies, type B companies. Are we type A? Everybody wants to know from me, since I'm the A god in the company. Are we type A or type B? I say, we are not type A, not type B. Type B. This is somebody's agenda. And if you keep reading that, we are going to fall for that. But what is his goal? His goal is to build 6 people company, not to hire people, let every agent work, and then money keeps coming to the VC's bank. That's his agenda. Do you think we can build a company with 5 engineers, a scalable production grade product with 5 people? So that is, so when you read without understanding, without parsing it through, you're going to fall for someone's agenda. And people are very smart. They're pushing a lot of things on LinkedIn. And C-level people, they are on LinkedIn day and night. They take that and come to their team saying, are we A people or B people now?
Well, can I ask you to do a steelman on his argument? So I think you've solidly represented your opinion on that, right? So, and I don't want to put you on the spot if you don't feel comfortable, but I'm curious about steelman his side.
What do you mean? Explain me a little bit more.
How do you make the best argument for that 6-person team? Where he's coming from?
He's coming from the thought process of, remember, CEO does not want to hire anybody anymore. They just want an agent to be replacing, product manager should be replaced by AI agent. So he's coming from the saving, it's a bottom line, top line game. CEO wants to save the money. I don't care. I don't have to hire anybody. Can you write me an agent to do this? They're coming from this, and VC is coming from number of people are absolutely low. Money should be absolutely high. I want my kaching in my bank. So they all have their own agenda. So if you parse the information, of course, CEO is going to agree with the VC because they don't need to hire somebody. But if you go to Andrew, the head of engineering, he says, buddy, look at this, what they are saying, this slop coming from AI. We need a vibe code cleaner to clean the vibe code which is written. There's a chain of people who actually clean everything. Believe me, we get all this slop coming from AI, and then I have engineers sitting in US, and then coming from, I don't want to name the countries, but the slop is coming. I know you use AI, you did not even spend 5 minutes writing this code. Now I got this Scott coming from US. I give him all the work. and he has to clean this whole work again to make it production grade ready, security, compliance, scalability, and I can keep going. But this is somebody's agenda in this world. They want you to basically shrink the companies because maximize their profit. That's their agenda. That's where they are coming from. So you, being the advisor of the company, be careful. Don't fall for agendas. Don't just agree because CEO is coming with a big shoe saying that we will all use AI. I don't want you to write a QA person. I was sitting in a BCG conference. There was one gentleman from some company came in and said, nowadays we just write the code and push it in production. We don't even bother to QA it. I say, what? You don't bother to QA it? This is a BCG conference. There are 50 people in the call. Anyway, sorry.
That's so huge. I mean, it's a massive problem, right? Massive. And we're all feeling the burden. I think I saw Mima's hand go up. It came off. Mima, did you have something that you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just wrote it in the comment. I think the other thing that's happening is like because of all that slop, whether it's a person creating it or receiving it on various levels, it just seems like there's an averaging happening. And I notice it even when I'm using any of the AI tools, it's like it has a tendency to go back to that average. And if you're not careful, that's what we're kind of producing. And I wonder, like, what does that do to society and to companies to stand out from each other in creative, innovative ways that we're so capable of as human?
Yeah, heard. I mean, so take me down that route. Maybe let's do a little bit of inversion. So we're down the doom cycle now, and you're looking down the barrel of what ostensibly is a massive problem where, we've done this sort of giant adoption and we're all building this thing that's like basically like a slot machine. So what do you see as like these like places we're guaranteeing failure by doing this, and what are like the dots for the failure? Where do we end up, right?
I mean, one positive potential outcome down that route is like people get so frustrated that everything starts to look and feel like the same AI output that they're like, we need to stand out. We need to do things manually. Go back to the handcrafts work, like crafted codes by a real human. So that might become a fashion again at some point, but after some painful period of not realizing that we've gotten to that point.
Heard. Kanika, I saw your
Yeah.
hand up.
So
Yeah.
we have Kanika and then Laveen. Please go one after the other. Sure. Kanika?
Yeah,
Okay, great.
yeah. My point is just that we need to have a human feedback loop in any workflows that we are using. That is the most important thing. I've seen like everybody wants to do autonomous things, but they, forget to involve the feedback loops. That is so important at this point that we cannot just skip it and run right into 100% automations with AI.
100%. And we'll do Levine and then we'll move on. Go for it, Levine.
Hi, Yuan. Great topic. So I just want to add to what Mima mentioned earlier. So just like how the recommendation engines work, right? I think human ingenuity is in the last mile thinking, right? Like if you do the 80-20 of it, like like the last 20% of our execution and thinking differentiates all of us, like the beginning 80 is still the same, but with the recommendation engines, they shrink all of us into like limited number of domains, right? So if I were to be interested in like 30 different topics on YouTube, it will try to channel me into only like 5 topics or 10 topics that's easy for them, right? And AI would do something similar once the for-profit forces start coming into play. We are still in the nascent stage where that recommendations are not coming in, right? So once the for-profit, like advertising or however the influence happens, so
Yeah.
all the actions that we have to take or decisions that we have to make are influenced by these people who are going to invest money, and we are going to take actions that like only few companies would profit, right? Like the tools that we use or services that we use or products that we use, everything will change. Like we were just like other big search engines and video recommendations, any of uh, stuff that is happening till now, that will happen in AI as it finds those channels.
Agreed. And it's such a danger for us that we need to be prepared. And so I think thank you so much, Levine. We just ran these 3 problems, albeit in a splatter sort of, who's the person I'm thinking of? Not Hockney. Anyway, the artist. But we did a little splatter painting, right? So we ran through 3 problems. We looked at it through second order thinking. We looked at it through inversion. We looked at it through Steele Manning. And it's not to reach that conclusion, right? I think all of us really do want to see more clearly. And it's so obvious in the ways that we're thinking here. It's that the discipline that I'm trying to work through and think through here is simple. And it's simple and it's difficult. And it's to keep asking, and then what, right? So before the next decision, especially one that feels obvious, and we're doing it here now, if this works exactly as planned, what happens next? And then what happens after that? If it works perfectly, what breaks? That's the thing that I think we think about a lot with AI. So Remind is near and dear to my heart. I built Remind because I saw how often good people make bad decisions. And that's been a real challenge that I think we are all suffering from now. And it's described in a lot of what you were mentioning, Sean and Mima, where we see a lot of this slop come in. How do we absorb it? How do we parse it? How do we deal with it? Right? And there are these invisible constraints on how they think. And, for me, when I see bad decision making, it's something that is predicated on our ways that we're limited by our own beliefs, by our judgments, by our biases, what have you. And we have to give that thought. And I saw it in my own life first. Overthinking disguised as rigor, momentum, mistaken for understanding, and it's confidence borrowed from others instead of built from my own principles. And the problem is the framing. So once you inherit the wrong frame, even perfect execution leads you somewhere you didn't intend to go. And personally, I kept getting it wrong, and that's why I needed better tools. That's why I created a practice and I made it repeatable. I used to, write on cards, white cards, a mental model that I would have right here on my shelf. And it helped me learn those mental models. And then Remind, that literally became like the card deck that I built, which is like this little guy right here. So I built this deck, and it's just based on all of the models that have been percolating that I think are the most valuable when it comes to clear thinking. And it's always something that I can return to when decisions feel heavy, when clarity slips, when certainty becomes almost too easy, right? I think we all feel these like really deep convictions sometimes, and it's good to ask that question. And for me, what I like about it is Remind, it doesn't tell you what to think. It gives you tools to examine how you think. And that's the difference. And for me, it's everything.
Well, I'm so sorry. I don't want to interrupt your final thought. I'm going to be sharing the barcode
Yeah,
for
go for it.
people to scan, but please continue to share more about Remind.
For sure. I have one last thought as you take a look at this feedback form. And it's this: I've been writing this idea of a thinker's manifesto, and mostly to kind of absorb what I've been thinking. And I'm curious about your feelings about it. And so I'll certainly put this in the notes out after this conversation and send you how to get to Remind if you're curious. And otherwise, I'll leave you with this thought. And it's the thinker's creed. This is it. And I'll read it very slowly. I will not mistake information for insight. I will build mental models, not mental walls. I will measure ideas by their utility, not their novelty. I will slow down to think so I can speed up to act. I will choose clarity over certainty. Others outsource their thinking. I will own mine. And that's the big reveal. I have appreciated this time so much with you all. Thank you. Thank you for hanging out with me for the last hour. Now that you know the pattern, you can't unsee it. And honestly, the question is what you do next. So use every tool available and still be the one driving.
Thank you, Yuan. That was so powerful. I must say, this is the first conversation with 0 slides, and people have stayed engaged and have benefited from it. So, congratulations on that. I think that was fantastic. You held everybody's attention. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I'm curious to see how you'll apply what we've learned today. And we'll send you guys an email with the resources that Juan chooses to share and also the recording of this meeting so you can go back and find those moments that really sparked an idea in you. Thank you to everyone who participated. I loved the enthusiasm on this call. So thank you and have a wonderful day. And Juan, thank you so much. This was fantastic. Take care.
Cheers. Thank you all.
Bye.